Welcome to our Python and AWS for Data and Analytics Bootcamp. In the previous video, part 1 of this data pipeline series, I provided a brief overview of the data pipelines and showed you how to build a simple Lambda function in AWS and how to build an API. In this video, I want to take you through a very simple API where I have an API which accepts an electronic referral and stores the result in a relational database. For this exercise, I will use a simple JSON format for the data exchange, as this is a simple demonstration. Later, in my subsequent video, I will show you a more sophisticated demonstration of a referral API which uses standards-based FHIR payload for the referral data. But for now, let's get started with a simple demonstration. To build up our data pipelines, we will build an API that accepts a referral with a simple but predefined referral data in a form of a JSON payload. I will also show you some simple data validation and error handling as part of a API management. To get started, let's first create an account with Vercel, an upcoming cloud provider. The reason I'm using Vercel is that you do not need a credit card to create a Postgres instance, and it's free to create your first database. Let's click on Vercel and get started. And now, let's click on Sign Up. I will click on Hobby and put in my name. Let's continue. And I want to create an account using an email. Earlier on, I have already created an account using GitHub. That is my personal preference. But for this demonstration, I will continue with an email. I have a temporary email that I will use to create this account. All right. I now need to verify this email, so let me go do that. I have verified my email, and the sign up should be successful. Okay, now it says before I can continue, I need to provide additional verification. Let me go do that now. I hope by now you have successfully managed to create your account on Vercel. Next, sign into your Vercel account. Once you logged into Vercel, you will see a screen like this. What I want you to do is click on Storage, click on Create Database, select Postgres, click Create. Now, I've already gone ahead and have done that in the interest of time. So I've created a database called Bootcamp DB. Let me click on that. Once you have done that, if you scroll down to where it says data, you'll be able to see these two options called browse and query. When you click on browse, you'll see that I have already created a couple of database tables, but what we will do is create a new table for eReferrals. So click on query. This is essentially your SQL editor. I have pre-prepared my create table statement. I've just pasted the create statement. Let me run the query. It says the query is successful. Just to see how this works, let me click on browse. I can see now there is a new table called eReferrals. In the eReferral, I can see all the various different columns. The table is empty. So far, so good. Now let's go ahead and continue with our demonstration. Now that our database is created, let's go ahead and build our AWS Lambda function that accepts a referral. Okay, now let's create our Lambda function. If you recall, I clicked on Lambda, You can see I already have quite a number of Lambda functions already. Let's create a new function. I'll select a author from scratch. I'll call this a demo referral. I will select Python 3.2, and the rest I'll just keep the defaults and click create. Now my demo referral is created. Let's look at the source code. Next step is to go into a code. You can see I have my skeleton code. So what I'll do is I will simply go ahead and delete all of that. And then I'll copy and paste the code that I have written up earlier. You'll be able to see the details of this code in the LMS. A quick overview of the code. I'm doing an import of JSON. Notice that I already have a import of the Python library for Postgres. I will be loading a number of the environment variables, such as the host name, database name, username, and password. These will be coming out of your database, and I'll show you in a moment how to get access to that and how to define those variables. And I have an SQL statement. I have a function in here that creates the records in the database. You can go through the details of this code in your spare time. I've got a Lambda handler method, which is the method that gets called when this Lambda function gets called. I do some basic validation in this application, in this referral handler, where I look for missing data, or if the body of my referral is empty, then I throw back some error messages. Equally so, if there are some issues related to the data in the referral, then I again send some error messages. Or if some of the database functions fail, then I send out a 500 error message. Let's go ahead and save that. First thing I have to do is make sure that Postgres is loaded. I've already created a Lambda layer for that. So what I'll do is I click on a layer. I will click on add a layer. Let me click on custom layer. Let me choose the layer which has the libraries for Python for Postgres. You can see my separate video on how to set up the Postgres library in Python inside AWS Lambda. I will select version 1, click add. Okay, so far so good. Let me deploy this. So now that's deployed. Now let's click on test. First thing is I will create a test event. So let's call it my referral event. Let me remove all the data here and let me paste that details. Again, you'll see the details of this in the LMS. I've just provided some sample body, which has all the referral information. Let me click on save. But before this will work, let me set up all the environment variables. To do that, we will need to click on configurations. Under configurations, we need to look for the environment variables. This is where you'll need to create 4 environment variables by clicking on add environment variables. I've already gone ahead and created 4 of these. First one, it has to be called Postgres underscore user. Second is Postgres underscore host. Third is Postgres underscore password. Fourth is Postgres underscore database. The database will be Vercel DB. Again, you can get this information from your Vercel database setup. Secondly is the Postgres password. Again, this will be something you can get from your Postgres database that you've set up. The password will automatically be created for you. Postgres host, also something you can get from the Postgres database that you've just set up on Vercel. The Postgres username will be default. Please do not share these credentials. Now click on save. Now that my environment variables are saved, let's go and run this. Let's test it. Okay, this is a success. The status code is 200 and the body says record inserted successfully. Now let's go back into our Postgres database and see the record. So now that the Lambda function is created, let's go ahead and create our API. If you can remember what we did from our previous demonstration, we will click on Add a Trigger. I will select a API Gateway. Let's create a new API. Let's select HTTP API. We will select Open for now so that there is no password. I'll keep the default settings just for now. Okay, now it has created the demo referral API. Let's go ahead and configure this API. By clicking on API Gateway, I will click on the demo referral API. So now let's go ahead and configure this API a little bit. First thing I'm going to do is click on routes. Notice that I have any as a route. Let me click on that and let's change that so that this is only accepting a post method. Let me click on save. Great. Now let's go and test this out. I'm back to my Visual Studio to test this out. If you recall how we do that, we first click on Thunder Client. Let's create a new request. I'm just going to first simply copy and paste the URL from the Lambda Functions API. If you remember, we had set this as a post method. And the next thing I will need to do is click on body. Now the content of the body, I will copy and paste from the sample JSON format. And let's click send. Great. Record was inserted successfully. Now let's go back into our database and see if the data has been successfully created. Let's go down into browse. Let's select the eReferral table. There you go. That we have two rows of data. The first row of data was created when I created the Lambda test. And the second row of data is when I created when I inserted the record via the API. There you have it. Let's recap what we covered in this video. First, we created a new Postgres database in Vercel. If you like, you can also create a free tier AWS RDS Postgres instead. I have a separate video where I show you how to create an AWS RDS Postgres database table. Next, you learned how to create a simple referral Lambda function and how to create an API. I also showed you how to create a post API. And we then tested the API by passing the referral data to the API and test this against our Postgres database. Good luck!